I think of something constantly that Ira says a lot, and she said to me very early on is that seed saving is an everyday act of resistance. And as the years go on, that has stuck with me, and I see that in even more like vivid detail about how radical it is. And I think part of the work that I know myself and, my friends and colleagues are doing are really shining a light on how it can be really easy to integrate, seed saving into your own practices.
Welcome to episode 44 of the Seed Farmer Podcast. The podcast where I want you to harvest seeds from some of the vegetables and flowers growing in your farm or garden, and then to plant that seed out to grow delicious vegetables and beautiful flowers. If you enjoy the Seed Farmer Podcast and find it a good resource that helps you improve your seed work and farming, please support the show at spreadsheet.farm/support-podcast. I'm your host, Dan Brisebois, seed grower at Ujamaa Cooperative Farm and author of The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seeds. Today, we've got another great interview, but first, news. The first news is actually very related to the interview that we have today, because on Wednesday, December 17th, there is an organic seed community virtual open house. This is online. It's free. It's from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern, and it's the trial of this format. And the idea, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in the podcast, the details weren't yet ready, though we still talk about it. And before we had a name for it, which is the Organic Seed Community Virtual Open House, I was thinking of it as a solstice seed celebration. But anyway, they didn't take my name. That's okay. You can call it Solstice Seed Celebration if you come. And this is really open to anybody in the seed community who wants to go meet other seedy people. And the first third of the event is actually going to be a kind of speed dating, or maybe you should say seed dating event, where you'll be paired off. Well, not paired off, it'll be groups of 3. And then there's a couple other activities afterwards. So the purpose really is exchanging and talking with people and getting to know other seed people. If that appeals to you, then the link is in the show notes, and I'd love to see you there. I also gave a webinar this summer about growing produce for seed through the organization Going to Seed, which is a little bit confusing because my blog is Going to Seed. So if you've been following me for a while, you know that. Going to Seed, the organization, and Going to Seed, the blog, me, are two separate entities. But anyway, I did a workshop for Going to Seed. It's now available on YouTube, and it's about seeds, and it's about growing vegetables and produce on a market garden, and then how you both do selection and breeding work while also selling crops from the same beds, and the real synergy and opportunities that we have as market gardeners to do that. So the link is in the show notes also. And I feel like I should also have a holiday offer right now because we're getting to the holiday season. I have a harvest system design course. It's going to be 50% off. This is a live course I did a couple years ago. It's about 2 hours long. There's, the live videos, then there's some resource documents. So the link is in my show notes. So that's, I guess, my holiday offer if you're looking for something for somebody gardening. And I should highlight right now that this is not a seed focus. Some of the information is relevant to seed growers, but I designed it more with market growers in mind. The last piece of news is there's another episode, or been a couple episodes of Seeds and Their People. For a while, there was a bit of a hiatus. So when there were new episodes, I'd mention them here. Now I have an impression that Owen and Chris are putting out episodes more regularly, so I might not mention it consistently. Just join their feed and you'll get those episodes. But I thought I'd mention this one, episode 38, with Vivian Sansour. It's called On Palestinian Seeds, Longing and Love. It's a great conversation. As you're getting into maybe a slower time, and if you want to have something to listen to, a great episode. And now, let's get into today's conversation. Alexis Yamashita is this episode's guest. Alexis is a community organizer, seed grower, and PhD student in food systems at the University of Vermont. Alexis has been deeply involved with seed-based cooperatives. She helped found and served as co-director of Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance. She co-managed the Seed Racks division of Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, and she lived in the egalitarian intentional community, Twin Oaks. In this episode, Alexis shares how her background from cooperative seed work and community living to academic research shapes her vision for seed systems rooted in culture, equity, and collaboration. We explore the motivations behind her current work and how she bridges grassroots organizing with institutional research. In the deep dive, Alexis gets into growing mung beans and adzuki beans for seed, from growing to harvest to cleaning. Enjoy the conversation. Hi, Alexis. Welcome to the Seed Farmer Podcast.
Hello, Dan. It's wonderful to be here.
We've been on a lot of video calls in different seed spaces over the last year and a half, and I never really had a chance to chat with you. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know you better.
Same.
And for our listeners to get to know you better too, do you want to just start by talking a little bit about what you do in the seed world and maybe weave your seed story into it?
That sounds great. So, what I do in the seed world, I think about is really, I am a community organizer and seed grower. Just to give a nod to like my current, growing my relationship with seeds. I am also a food system PhD student at UVM. Where I feel like my seed story starts is where I was younger, like most, in learning gardening and also herbalism from my mom. And that carried throughout, the whole of my life thus far. And, but my connection with seeds came much later, even though the gardening and the herbalism was always present. And where I really feel like I started developing my relationship with seeds is when I started working for Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. And it was interesting to me when I think back during that time, because really my start with Southern Exposure came from the business angle. And I became a co-manager of the Seed Racks division of the business. And that was wonderful just to get experience to see, how a worker cooperative operates, how from an organizational standpoint we can have, more healthy collaborative, spaces, in business. And as a kind of side note too of what interests me on the business side is my master's degree, I do have an MBA. So like, and kind of an eclectic background professionally in different business capacities. I will say it never interested me to get an MBA to climb the corporate ladder, but to really learn the tools of business to be able to use them differently. So I feel like, really my start at Southern Exposure was like really starting me, like furthering me down that path of looking at, alternative organization structures and how we can build healthier business environments. But to bring this back to seeds, fairly early on in my time during Southern Exposure, I started to learn about seed growing and seed saving practices. And that really also started my journey of becoming a seed grower, too. And really, I think, the next important, part of my own seed story is when back in 2021, through my mentor, Ira Wallace, I got connected with Benita Deeb, who, of course, is one of the founders of Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance. And I joined the founding team of Ujamaa as well. And this really very much connected me to really not only from a personal standpoint, but, really incorporating in my own seed work, both from a community organizing standpoint and a seed growing standpoint the importance of culturally meaningful seeds. And that really started a very deeply personal part of my journey in relationship with seeds. And that's something that continues to this day. And something that, it's always funny to think about the things that really connect us to our current work that we and kind of looking in hindsight, that are part of our journey, but that, aren't necessarily so front and center until like a present moment that comes out. My years with Southern Exposure and Ujamaa, had me thinking back to my childhood and gardening and growing and realizing that seeds, very much, and that cultural connection to seeds have been, ever present, since the beginning. And so to kind of like wrap up the part of my seed story, is thinking back, I'm a Japanese Hispanic American and I grew up in Virginia. And, the places in Virginia that I grew up, there weren't, large Japanese American communities. And also, talking about, access to my culturally relevant crops, there wasn't a lot of access to those seeds or produce, around Virginia. So my grandparents used to send care packages from Hawaii with seeds that my mom learned how to grow in our garden. And that was one main way we access certain varieties of Japanese crops. So it's just something that will continue to be on my mind, of even though it feels like, my relationship with seeds was cultivated, like well into my adulthood, the relationship has been there all along, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you just had the foundation. You had there was a really good garden bed
Yes.
just ready to understand what the seeds were.
To say it was a life-changing experience, to be able to get to know seeds when I started with Southern Exposure is an understatement. And it's something that still like is very much, present on my mind, about like how incredible seeds are and how much power they have to really transform our lives in so many ways, and also our food and agriculture systems.
Life changing is not small words. And is there a specific life changing moment that made you realize that relationship, or is it kind of a gradual accumulation of realizations that just turned into life changing?
Yeah, I think I would say gradual, that turned into life changing. And it was very much like reflecting on, the connections that myself and my family have had to agriculture. And, again, that kind of looking back while also being in the present of like, moving forward and me developing my own relationship to seeds, through the work that I've been doing for years now. And yeah, I think a lot about, so on the Japanese side of my family, my great grandparents immigrated from Japan, and my great grandfather immigrated as a pineapple plantation worker, and there were also like extended family members, like I think of my great uncle Hitoshi, that actually worked in the ag experiment station in Hawaii, on Maui too, and in their plant breeding, yeah, research work. So, it's just kind of cool to kind of think about, family history wise, there's a lot that is not a surprise to what I'm doing today. But, that through thread has really only emerged and connecting all these like different nodes in recent years for me. And also really, still drawing very much inspiration, to, growing my love and interest with seeds and how I can continue, what feels like the, work that my family has been doing for generations.
It's really nice to realize you're part of a lineage, even if
Yes.
you couldn't have seen that when you were a teenager, or kind of like planning out when you were deciding to go to do an MBA, just to not realize it was part of, you were just carrying on the tradition.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and I think it's even still like, and I don't think this is going to stop, of just like that unfolding, and thinking of my personal history and how that connects to my family's history, and just seeing those significant points emerge, and I think that's going to be a lifelong journey for me. But it is also something too that, kind of thinking on the point of my own seed story. And this is something that really I, very much credit to my seed work is also, feeling more of a sense of belonging and being mixed race and, having this Japanese and Hispanic background. And also how do those parts of me fit together? And, that's the, I think, deeply personal part of like my seed story is just how much of the sense of belonging that I think I've been seeking for, ever since I was a child, that I really feel like that's coming to fruition through my seed work and really making sense of like having a multicultural mixed race background.
Thanks for sharing that depth of where your seed story kind of comes from and it's going. I was curious when you were talking about when you were younger, getting seeds of Japanese vegetables. Did you save any of those seeds, or your family save any of those seeds as a way to keep that going, or you're always dependent on it being shipped to you?
Yeah, so this is the interesting part is my mom did dabble a little bit with experimental seed saving, but we didn't really save a lot of seeds. So we were like mostly, to my understanding, dependent on getting seeds shipped. And that's something that I think about, like if there was the proverbial time machine to be able to go back and go, hey, we could save seeds, how that might have been different. And it's also, I think it's very much thinking about like that part of and that's what I would really call, like, even though I didn't, as I said, realize it, I would say that's the origin of like my seed story was those moments in my mom's garden, and seeing how much, or that we did not save seed really is, I think, a testament to, writ large in society, how we are, very much disconnected, in our relationship with seeds and also seed growing and seed saving practices that I know, that have been, around, since we've been around, and, that relationship. And I know that that is also very much a testament to like the dominant seed system, and the commodity based seed system out there, and really, leading us to this place where we're very much disconnected, writ large from our own seed growing and seed saving. And so it's something that I have thought about, of like, it's not, to me, it's not a question of why that is, and that has been part of my own learning with seeds, is really what causes and circumstances really led to that, and it also is something that very much inspires my current seed work, and I know many of my friends and colleagues, in the, so-called seed world too, is to like advocate for those, building, reconnecting, and resurrecting those relationships.
I love that. To be able to inspire gardeners to be able to just see that seed harvest as just like one extra thing you can do in your garden. And I mean, farmers too. Farmers ones that's a little bit bigger because there can be quality issues, there can be seed volume issues that like there's other things too. But like just in a garden, just being able to keep a couple
Yeah,
fruit, and if you do that generation after generation, suddenly you have something that's adapted to where you are.
yeah. And one thing I loved in the question you mentioned is just like, did you, were you dependent on getting seeds shipped, And I think there's so much, out there that, even, before I started with Southern Exposure, I even thought, like, okay, you wanted to grow, even in your home garden, you bought seeds year over year, and that's how you got your seeds. Admittedly, I never really thought of home seed saving practices until, I met Ira, and until I started, working for Southern Exposure, and even I remember the first time I really, heard of the concept of like home seed saving practices, it felt so intimidating to me of going, oh gosh, this has got to be something that I will need years of learning and experience to even start doing. And, of course, that isn't the case, and it is something that, with learning a little bit of foundational like know-how of processing, you can get really right into it. And to me, seeing how, again, this perception in my mind was built as this like complex thing, that again would take years of study to begin even starting, and really recognizing that false perception that was built up in my head and kind of questioning the why of it. I think this is really, again, a nod to like our conventional systems and structures out there and how it is disconnecting us, from that relationship. And, I think of something constantly that Ira says a lot, and she said to me very early on, and, getting to know each other, is that seed saving is an everyday act of resistance. And as the years go on, that has stuck with me, and I see that in even more like vivid detail about how radical it is, And I think part of the work that I know myself and, my friends and colleagues are doing are really shining a light, on you know, um, how it can be really easy to integrate seed saving into your own practices, and hopefully transforming that false perception that it's something that's extremely technical, that again you need a lot of experience to even start dipping your toe in, and that's something that's really meaningful to me, and now like my own growing practices. And even down to like yeah, just kind of thinking about like what's been on my mind more recently is just like really the importance of home gardeners in that equation, too, of like the resiliency of our seed system, and really fortifying alternative seed systems through diversified seed work.
So, to help gardeners and farmers better kind of resist this, I don't know if I guess maybe resist is the right word, but just this dominant, I don't know if narrative's the right word, that kind of
I
capitalism
like it, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
system is trying to get us to buy
Hmm.
stuff rather than do it ourselves, and to rely on something else rather than to rely on cultural practices that could have been maintained and fostered for generations. You've been hosting, this is my transition here, you've been hosting calls this summer with a number of different seed people and seed organizations. I've been seeing it pop up in my calendar as Seed Space. I don't know if that's a formal name or if that's just a description. Maybe I'll hand this over to you and you can tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about what you've been hosting.
Yeah, and maybe to add in a segue too, when I think about what has been important to my own seed work, is also very much being involved in cooperatives and collectives, and of course, Southern Exposure being a worker cooperative seed company, Ujamaa being a Black Indigenous people of color seed farming collective. So I just wanted to briefly mention that that is something that is also very front and center in my work, is, really building, collective and collaborative spaces too. And this is my own segue into what we'll affectionately call as more of a working title right now, but who knows? It could be the permanent, like name that sticks to the seed space. So, in talking about the spirit of collaboration, I do want to acknowledge, where this concept came from. And really, the beginning ideas of the seed space was born out of conversations with two dear friends and colleagues, Shanda Robinson Banks, who is a founding member of Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance too, and also Jack Kloppenberg, who is, wears many hats and has been involved in, very important seed work for decades. And what we were talking about, in like some conversations, not too long before the Organic Seed Growers Conference, is really feeling the need of like really connecting different seed communities together, and especially in North America, and knowing there's this amazing diversified seed work that is out there. But often it can, not that it is siloed, but it can feel siloed, at times. So we really questioned, what could be helpful as another means to really connect as a broader community, in hopes of also, maybe gaining momentum to create, even like the sense of a bigger movement too. So, through many conversations, we started to kind of flesh out, an idea to explore that was kind of like the like starting idea of the seed space. And then our next stop was to take it, to the Organic Seed Growers Conference and invite people to, have conversations about, if we were to help support a space where we're building momentum towards a broader movement, but really approaching this from connecting different seed communities together, like what could be helpful? What are the needs out there? And one thing that we were very grateful is that there was, interest. And I know this is another way you and I connected in this, is to say, yeah, let's explore, this further. So over the last months of this year, there has been a group of people who have graciously volunteered their time to have these conversations of going, how can we really serve connecting our seed communities together? And this brings us to, what we've landed on is really recognizing that, as the times that we have to connect, like, or quite often at conferences, at places that are very structured, and we all know how conferences are, and they're amazing, but they're quite often sometimes you're running from one workshop to another, and there isn't, or being on organizing calls, as I know you and I met, being on the planning committee of the Organic Seed Growers Conference. And yeah, and what was coming out of the group is wanting more time to connect in what feels like a little bit more of an unstructured way, and to find, like talk about the intersectionality of our work and how we can connect. So this is what brought us to really this concept of, could we help, as an organizing group, to foster spaces that really center connection, and also questioning, like, what would be, fun and exciting ways to organize those spaces. And I think the hopes of, the seed space right now and the starting idea is not only that we can, foster like individual connections between people to find more community that intersects with their own individual seed work, but also to maybe help do something that feels like more incremental visioning of what it may look like to build a broader seed movement and really connect all of our communities together that are swimming similar seed work and wanting to see aspirationally, like, a better seed system, here in North America.
So that's not an easy feat to create unstructured, spontaneous space for people to become best friends, or at least to network, and
I like best friends too.
and to then also seed and weave and build a better vision for the seed community that embodies
Yes.
what we're trying to achieve. Because we're all people, communities involved in this seed work. We have different things that are personally more important to us, but doesn't mean that we don't support other people's like work too. It's just we might not be thinking about it actively, and it's nice to have that place to learn from and teach and broaden our work so that it can have more than just our specific needs being met.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think on a note of like hearing what you're saying too is, and I think I would gander both you and I have seen this in, our seed work, is there are also like very much challenges to bringing together, diversified, or very diverse, different types of seed work, and understanding that that if we're going to see better seed and agriculture systems, it's not reliant on one solution. It is really the intersection of many, many different types of work. But often, when you're trying to do that, there are, of course, challenges and tensions that come up and push and pulls, So I think also something personally for me, I hope, kind of thinking about like the longer term opportunity of, the seed space is perhaps this could be a space where we're also able to dive deeper into those, kind of challenging points together, and really, as like a bigger community, have those conversations and also figure out how we can connect, together, So that's something else that, personally for me, I think is my big dream, of what the space could be is also, again, as I mentioned, bringing in that intersectionality and the interconnections and go, what is really vibing here? And what are some challenges that are being, we are presented with? And how can we really grapple with those challenges to, really find those points of connection and not have them polarized as well?
Yeah, yeah. It's important to have places where people can hear each other and have the time to let it to actually hear and not just to
Yes,
respond right away, and to let it hear, sink in, process it, find what's in commonality, and then find the points that maybe are different and that can be
right.
explored, and why they're different, and what's ways to value the differences.
Yeah.
This is a big goal, but on the last call that I was on, there was ideas to start at the beginning, not necessarily start at those
Yes.
those tough conversations,
Yeah.
but start at the beginning,
Yeah.
and and there's been a date chosen for a
Mhm.
first. We call it a gathering, an event on December 17th. Before I ask you to tell us a little bit about what this is, I recognize, because I was on the call, that I know that this is still an idea that's being formed, and more
Mhm.
details will be planned in the next week or two. So, but we're recording this episode in advance to make sure that people can hear about it before
Yeah.
the event, so they have time to plan if they want to participate. And I'll update the show notes. And actually, if you're listening to this, in the intro and the show notes, well, I've already told you what's going to happen. But right now, so we have a time machine right now. We're back at the in time, and kind of what is being hoped for this event. And I will
Mhm.
hand it to you.
Yeah, so what's hope for this event? And just very acknowledging big dreams, but totally could not agree more. It's like always finding how do we start too. So this is very much answering the question of how we start. So the December 17th event and how it's coming together is going to be a virtual gathering space where, again, the emphasis is how we can support connection. We are hoping to host fairly regular gatherings, starting in 2026. So I feel like this upcoming gathering is a little bit of kind of like a pilot to also seek feedback too of the people that are interested to come and connect of like what they would like to see in future spaces and really crowdsource ideas, As you mentioned, we are still working out like the final details of it, but just to kind of, get folks excited, I can mention some of the ideas that have been percolating out. I think one of the favorites of the group, and this came back or, originated as an idea in the conversations at the Organic Seed Growers Conference is this concept of what we're affectionately calling seed dating. So, and what we're looking to do is maybe have like breakout rooms where like people are like, can have like a one on one conversation with somebody that, they may not have necessarily a chance to interact with, through like, other channels. So that's kind of like one thing we're looking to do is to, yeah, create, if it's not, in the December 17th event, but, a future event, is to help like, yeah, like foster more one-on-one connections. We have also, floated the idea of this kind of get to know your seed organizations, space. So like having breakout rooms hosted with different organizations where people can pop in and have a conversation. And it's not only about like getting to know getting to know more about like the diversity of different groups and organizations doing amazing seed work, but also very much engaging in conversation again to build community. And we also, I think the last part of what's coming to mind right now to kind of highlight and going back to what was mentioning about aspirationally kind of visioning of what a broader movement could look like together is we're also thinking about ways to incorporate more incremental visioning, into these calls too. But yeah, final plans of what the exact format for our first gathering are to be determined. What I can say definitively is it will be a mixture of engagements. And that's something that does feel important to the organizing group is that we have kind of a mixture of engagements, not only to make it fun and exciting, but to really offer, different spaces, to be able to connect because, for a lot of folks, maybe the seed dating isn't their jam, so to speak. So we maybe small groups is more somebody else's, it's their jam. So in any case, what I'm trying to say is we also want to support, like different ways we can connect in our time together with recognizing that we all have different ways of connecting that resonate with each other. And, it's not a one size fits all.
And who do you think would enjoy, like, what kind of people would enjoy this event and should consider coming?
I would say anybody that, even if it's a starting notion of, I have a connection to seeds. And that actually, another important point that I want to highlight in our organizing around this space is we also want to build a space for people that, may feel they're fairly new to seeds, and have a space where they could feel welcomed, into that community and have like a just an easier way to get connected, and brought into the seed community. So, my answer to who this, gathering could be for is anybody that loves seeds, works with seeds, are interested with seeds, has thought about seeds, that's really who this is for, because also, I know it's been a point of our conversation too, to how like for us who have been involved in seed communities and work for years, how we can also broaden our own communities, and also really question who may be missing at the table that, have an important voice in our work, and something that I know I've talked to like friends and colleagues a lot about is also recognizing, just for an example, farmers writ large, and even if they're not, specifically seed growers and seed farmers, but that they are very much, farmers writ large are a part of our seed community.
And they care about seed.
And they care about seed. Absolutely, and as we know, we wouldn't have food without seed, so I want to like very much, emphasize the reciprocal, nature of this, of, welcoming, new people to like, what feels like more of a specific like seed-based community. But for us that are invested in our seed communities to also be able to broaden our seed communities too.
Yeah, so I would just guess that if somebody has taken the effort to listen to this long of the Seed Farmer podcast, to this conversation, they probably would enjoy being part of this event.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is a free event. So people, there's no cost. What else should I ask you about the event?
Well, in this, I also want to give a shout out to the Organic Seed Alliance for being our host for this event too. And, just also, the amazing work they've been doing for years, connecting together in the seed community. And I know if it wasn't for the Organic Seed Alliance, we wouldn't have met. So, I think that's the last important thing that comes to mind about the event is, just wanting to express gratitude, for the Organic Seed Alliance and also recognize, the amazing work they're doing.
Well, thanks for pitching this event to us. And why don't we pivot the conversation and talk shop a little bit?
Sounds great.
If you're already a seed farmer, or even just thinking about harvesting seed from your plants for the first time, head over to seedgrowers.farm for my free seed grower resources. There is cross-pollination information, seed yield information, even a few seed spreadsheets. There's also a list of my favorite seed books and podcasts. While you're there, you can also sign up for my weekly newsletter to get seed grower tips and stories straight into your inbox. So head to seedgrowers.farm for my seed grower resources. Now, back to the show. So 2 crops that you talked about being interested in talking about, like doing more of a deep dive into, you mentioned adzuki beans and mung beans.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit why you've chosen these crops, what your work is with them, and then we can jump into the actual talk about the growing for seed.
So, very much, this is kind of pulling the through thread of the importance that in my seed work, really talking about how important collaborations, collectives, and cooperatives are. I want to just acknowledge that my work with mung beans and adzuki beans are very much held in collaborative spaces. And my personal interest in these 2 crops, though, are very much from a personal connection, in my own culturally meaningful foods. So the primary reason that excites me to work, build a relationship, with mung beans and adzuki beans from a seed growing perspective is really, that they are 2 crops that have been very important to me and my own, my own food cultures. So I think that's also something else that, has been on my mind. And to just quickly mention, is just questioning how we really can start our seed work from like more of a relational place. And I know this is something that Ujamaa really emphasizes in our work is really talking about what is our seed story and how can we start look at seed growing really from a relational perspective. So so that's the the biggest reason that interests me to work with these crops on a personal level. And if we kind of zoom out a bit more, another important part of realizing that mung beans and adzuki beans are important to many different food cultures, and really, recognizing the diasporic traditions that are there is, another interest of mine, to work with, mung beans and adzuki beans on really a local and regional basis, and just as a side note, I'm in Vermont these days. Is to broaden access to these culturally relevant crops that many different community that are important to many different communities. So long story short, there is like a very multidimensional cultural aspect that really fuels my work, not only on my individual personal level, but thinking about how underrepresented these 2 crops are, in US food and farming systems, and also wanting to cultivate a space for them, to help strengthen local and regional food systems and agriculture systems too.
The next question I would ask is, are both of these or either of them self-pollinating?
Yeah, they are self-pollinating because both for mung beans and adzuki beans, the rate of outcrossing is very minimal.
So if you grew them side by side, you wouldn't see much crossing the next year.
Yes, that is my understanding of getting to know these crops. Of course, with any crops, there is, still isolation distance recommendations, but I know for like the two legumes I'm working with, they're small. And yeah, so if you grow the crops side by side, they're not like corn where you will see like dramatic, like very, like visual cues of, oh, these have been making friends with each other.
So I'm going to ask you about like just kind of the life cycle, when you plant and that kind of stuff. But do you want to tell a little bit about like climatic range, or like are you growing these crops in Vermont right now?
So, and I'll put on my PhD student hat for just one moment. And and this is also kind of a fun part of my own seed, my journey and building relationship with seeds is now being in the second year of the food system PhD program and now growing my relationship with seeds through research, which is really exciting. And so just putting on my student hat on for a moment, what I'm working on is looking at participatory methods of plant breeding with really an emphasis on community-based methods for the regional adaptation of culturally meaningful seed varieties. And two of the main crops I'm working with are, in my research are mung beans and adzuki beans. Also, side note, I'm also working with buckwheat as well. So the work that I'm doing with mung beans and adzuki beans that really bridge not only the academic the so-called academic research I'm doing with my community based impersonal seed work is very much focused on the Northeast and, within Vermont. So we are looking at more cold tolerant, varieties of mung bean and adzuki bean that can grow well in Vermont.
So I know I want to ask you about the growing, but I have so many questions that are emerging. um, is the beginning point of this work screening varieties and then working with varieties that already exist, or is there any like manual crossing that's happening to create a population that you're selecting from?
Yeah, so the work with mung beans and adzuki beans, and just another shout out I want to give, to people I've been working with actually for several years on different research, but I'm working with actively on my research is Dr. Eric von Wetberg and Dr. Daniel Tobin. So, really just emphasizing collaborative natures. Want to give them a quick shout out. Yeah, so what I'm doing, and this is where like really Eric comes in. And Eric is trained as a plant geneticist. Is we are doing variety screenings of mung beans and adzuki beans. With the mung beans, we just wrapped our second year of really quite large variety trials. We have trialed over 50 varieties of mung beans just alone at the UVM horticulture farm. The Organic Seed Alliance is also has been doing variety trials with us for the last couple of years out at their farm in California. So yeah, I think in totality is roughly around like I give or take 100 mung bean varieties that we're looking at between the two trialing sites. With the adzuki beans, we are in our first year of trials, and we trialed about 34 different varieties to really start to dial in, what is, really looks like is promising for the climate. And as you know, like being up north, drastically shorter, growing seasons, colder, and what varieties look like they can work well with Vermont's climate. So that's where we started the work. What we're looking at actually starting next season is starting to do crosses, So from the initial trialing, information we have, with both mung beans and adzuki beans, we will continue with those variety trials to get more information on each specific variety. And one side note too of the work that we're doing, the majority of the germplasm that we're working with are seeds are from the USDA germplasm collection, aka GRIN. So there is a part embedded in our work of wanting to increase access to varieties that, in community channels. And, I just want to clarify when I say community channels, we're not, solely talking about like, we're doing this for profit and selling seeds. That's not our primary, aim. It is really looking at diversified seed access too through, so, one thing I want to emphasize is just like, because I think it's a common thing to think about, with university-based work is, oh, you're looking to release a variety, to sell commercially, and that, may be a possibility down the line, but really, the emphasis is making this community accessible for anybody that, mung beans and adzuki beans are really important to them. And so just wanted to kind of give like a little nod to that, as I'm talking about the work that we're doing with mung beans and adzuki beans. Yeah, so to bring this back around to the crosses is, from the initial variety trials, and this is what we'll be doing through the winter now that we're wrapped with the growing season, is fleshing through all that information that we've gotten over the last 2 seasons and really identifying varieties that look promising for crosses and actually doing manual crosses come next year, along with continuing, again, variety trials. And where the participatory part comes in too is, also looking to engage, farmers and gardeners in the variety trials so that their voices are represented, in our work. And just as a side note too, since I know I mentioned that we're in year 2 of trials with mung beans, is we have, as it suggested with OSA, we also sent this out. We sent out varieties to a cohort of different farmers and growers, different mung bean varieties to evaluate and back in 2024. And there's kind of like, and kind of talking about community connections, there's a little bit of complex web to our mung bean work that we're doing here at the University of Vermont, because this is also affiliated with a emergent community plant breeding project that Utopian Seed Project, Ujamaa, and Experimental Farm Network, along with OSA, are part of this like emerging collaboration too. So I just want to mention that, on the mung bean, our work with mung beans is also feeding into this broader collaboration. And within that broader collaboration, where our work with mung bean started was sending out seeds to different growers again that are in different regions of the US, mainly the Southeast, the Pacific Northwest, and the Northeast.
Wow. So now is the basic question.
Yeah.
How do you grow mung beans?
Yes.
Can I refer to both of these together when I'm asking you how to grow them to seed, or are they different enough that you want me to ask separately?
I think they're similar enough that we could just, how about we affectionately call them culturally meaningful legumes?
Okay. How do we grow these legumes to seed?
I'm sorry, I think that's like my new academic brain getting into things of like, oh, this is, I'm like, no, that is not short. Sorry. You gotta have fun, putting an academic joke every now and then out there. So these legumes, yes. Yeah, so they are very similar in how you grow them. Of course, they're different. And I think that very much the difference comes from like getting to know each variety. So, but the base of how you grow them is similar. So it is something where, and I'll base this, just like talking about how to grow them in Vermont is, as soon, so one difference just to mention, out of the gray, as soon as I'm like, oh, they're similar, here's a difference, is mung beans, when they are planted, they will want warmer soil. Adzuki beans actually can tolerate, being planted in colder soil. But if you were to like say be interested in planting both of them, you can plant them around the same time. So what we aim to do is plant them as soon as possible after like the last frost.
So both of them are frost sensitive.
Yes, I would recommend, planting them after, you are in the clear with frost. Even though adzuki beans, to my knowledge, can be planted in a bit colder soil. To me getting to know these crops too, to my knowledge, it is something that you do want to wait, make sure you're free and clear of frost before you plant them. And we do plant them. So when you're planting them, it's not necessary for the plant to actually grow, but it is super helpful. And having the plant grow healthier is we do use inoculum. So on the seed. So it's just something that I want to highlight that if somebody's interested in growing, like these, as we're calling them, these legumes, is it's not, if they don't, if somebody doesn't have access to inoculum, it's like, oh no, they won't grow. They will grow, but it does like help.
Is it species specific inoculum, or is it more like a broader something that you might put on peas too? Or
It is species specific. So you do want to check, if you are interested to grow these crops, that you are getting the appropriate inoculum. And this is something where like yeah, it should be listed on the information, when you are buying, the inoculum. So we do coat the seeds with the inoculum, and we direct sow the seeds. And we usually plant them about like 5 or 6 inches apart, and about like 3 or 4 inches, deep, so you can plant them fairly close together. Again, just to summarize, how to plant after you're free and clear in the spring of frost. Get your inoculum out, coat the seeds, direct sow them about 5 to 6 inches apart, and about, we'll say, 3 inches down, and yeah, they're a fairly easy crop to maintain with and maintenance looks like of just like any maintenance that you would suspect of, keeping the areas free and clear with weeds.
are they bushing or are they vining?
That's a good question. Thank you. They are bushing. Both varieties are bushing, and they are a bit different in the size of bushing. From our variety trials, like mung beans will produce like a larger, size bush, and ballparking it around like maybe like a couple of feet or so, give or take. From the adzuki bean, or maybe like more like three. The adzuki beans are a little bit, from our initial variety trials, they are a little bit more stouter than adzuki beans. I'm sorry, mung beans. So yeah, so that's been kind of interesting to see because in our plot at the Hort farm, we did have the mung beans, the adzuki beans, like in the same plot in different like spaces, it just to see the growing difference. So yeah, to make this more concise, mung beans are like a little bit of a larger bush bean. And overall, what we're saying is Azuki beans are a little bit smaller, but both of them are bush beans, so you don't need any type of trellising for them to grow.
So I'm going to jump us ahead to signs of harvest. So they're going to grow like pods, like as other legumes do. And what are you looking for when it's time to harvest?
Yeah, it's what we're looking for when it's time to harvest is really looking for, and this is when you get like into more specifics of like looking at pod color, size, it just like I would say for people that have grown legumes, there are definitely similar indicators in maturity to size, that you're looking at. But that's also something we're getting to know in the varieties is to see the differences in, pod size, also the bean, along with there's also color variation too. But yeah, what we're looking for is, yeah, just looking at, really color, and also like pod structure too for the signs of, maturity for each, variety. And they can be a little bit different since we have been doing variety trials.
Does that kind of get like a tannish color and like papery, kind of the way like a bean pod would, like a common bean pod would, or is it a bit different?
It's a bit different. So, from what I've seen, the indicators I've been looking for with mung bean and adzuki beans is we do see some pod color variations, but overall, they are deeper green pods, and as they do dry, so there's differences in how they dry. Like one thing I'm noticing with the adzuki beans is like you do see like the tannish color, mung beans, they do kind of retain like a different kind of like it's not like a vibrant darker green color, but they don't go full tan and they look like kind of like a duller kind of dried dark, color that looks a little greenish. So one thing that I've been doing with harvesting though, and this is actually also talking to some local community members that have familiarity with mung beans and adzuki beans at time of harvest, what we're doing is actually, harvesting the whole plant and, not detaching the beans, but harvesting the whole plant and letting the whole plant dry out, and then, when things are dry, then we, harvest the pods and process the seed. So this is also kind of similar to like growing a lot of pole beans where you let them dry on the vine. We are letting them dry on the plant, and harvesting the whole plant to let them dry.
Are you stripping the pods off of the plant before processing, or could you just take the whole plant and kind of like whip it into a bin to shatter it or stomp on it?
Yeah, you might be able to probably put it into a bin and shatter and stomp on it and do like all of the threshing with the whole plant. Just for me personally, I have been detaching pods, but it is also something where I want to say right now we are dealing with multiple varieties at a smaller scale, and I anticipate as I scale up in trials or doing seed increases, the processing will be different. And I would imagine, we'll be looking at more, of course, like ways to do more bulk processing. So that is kind of on my mind to experiment more with this coming year because we are looking at like doing some increases is how like processing will change and kind of looking at ways to do more mass threshing, so I would imagine we will be looking at yeah, just like kind of threshing with the whole plants, maybe stomping, and it's side note, one of my favorite activities to be able to like get a big bin of seeds or bean pods and to stomp on 'em to thresh, would recommend it for any type of stress relief.
The last seed growing question I'm going to ask about these legumes is um, do they shatter easily? Like, do the pods stay sealed on the plant easily, or is there a risk of them shattering? And when you get to actually like on impact, do they split open pretty easy, or is it you have to fight with them to get these beans out?
Yeah, so something that we do monitor with the mung beans is they can shatter, I would say fairly easily ish, so like I think this also comes down time to yeah, harvesting, as well and determining that, sweet spot before you're seeing a lot of shattering. Still to be seen with the adzuki beans too, because again, full disclosure, I have grown different legume crops through the years. This was my first year growing adzuki beans, So I'm really basing, my knowledge off of, starting a relationship with these beans. And, when I was harvesting the adzuki beans, I did not notice like any like issues with shattering, or see that. So that's something that, I'm keeping my eye out in like future years and trials, is to see what shattering looks like. And as far as like processing goes, I wouldn't say you would have to fight with them. They seem pretty, easy. But I have, I would maybe like, just kind of like as a rough ballpark, maybe put them in the middle because there are definitely some beans that I've processed in the past that I feel like a little bit easier to like, that pop open a bit easier. But at the same time, too, it's not like you're getting in a dugout with them to, get the beans processed.
All right, so let's get into our wrap up questions. What would you tell your younger seed growing self?
Oh, yeah, I love that question. I think this is kind of going back to something that I might have like touched, I think I touched on in kind of sharing my seed story. If I could go back to my younger seeds, like saving growing self, is I would tell her not to be intimidated, and that you can do it. And I know this is very like, it's not a super technical thing, but just like, I really can't, emphasize enough. Like when I got interested in, like, could I be a seed grower myself? And how actually, if I'm honest, scared and intimidated I was. And really thinking, gosh, I know I can, garden, I can grow, vegetables, but really can I be a seed grower, And there was a lot of intimidation, and again, I think this is just because of the disconnection, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. That's the first thing that comes to mind when thinking about that question is I would just say don't be intimidated. This is meant for you as it's meant for everybody. And you just got to take that first step.
I love the as it's meant for everybody. It's a good thing to tell your younger seed growing self.
Yes.
What would you say to market growers to inspire them to start growing seed?
My answer to that would be is to emphasize how they can play a very vital role in supporting local and regionally based, food systems, and also cultivating in a very, a localized fashion, which I will say I am a believer that the movement in our food systems and the changes we need writ large are a decentralization and diversification. And this really goes in line of what I want to see aspirationally, seed systems change is to be decentralized and diversified. But to really, when I think about market growers and how they can play a very powerful part and, helping support, local biodiversity or the increase in different crop varieties out there, and also, by way of like doing, like, seed growing techniques like selection and carrying things forward help support, regional adaptation too. So I think the answer for the market gardener is, getting involved in some scale of seed growing and seed saving. And as you know, it doesn't have to be like an all or nothing thing, and I think this is one of the beauties of seed growing and seed saving is it can help, market gardeners and farms diversify their activities too, is that, they're very critical, in helping, local biodiversity and preserving and enhancing that.
And is there something that I should have asked you?
Ooh. I know we covered a lot of ground. I think, the point that I'd like to end on and just really, thinking about, the disconnects that exist, in our mind, with our relationships to seed, food, and ag is really ending on the point that seeds are absolutely fundamental to the health of both the food and agriculture systems. And I think, we all inherently know this because, again, as we're talking, of course, we know that we wouldn't have food without seeds or crops with crop foods without seeds. And, in our own ways, that we can to see how important it is to emphasize our seed system and the connection of our food and ag systems and the health and well-being of both of those systems. So I think, what comes to mind is I feel like there's been kind of a theme of talking about community and interdependence and really seeing that on a broader systemic way and how these three systems really are, critically interconnected and the power that seeds have to evoke change, not only in the seed system in of itself, but in our food and ag systems.
Those are some good thoughts. And how can people find out more about what you're doing?
These days, I am up in Vermont. My primary day in and day out, amongst the myriad of additional community organizing work I'm doing, is, as I said in the beginning, as a food system PhD student. So if people want to find me, my contact information should be out there on like the university websites. And as this chat has suggested, I am always enthusiastic to meet new friends and, really have some really lovely conversations about seeds. So so you can find me at the University of Vermont these days. And yeah, always happy to chat about seeds.
Well, thank you so much, Alexis, for coming on the Seed Farmer podcast. And I look forward to seeing you at the virtual gathering that's coming up next week after this episode airs.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me today on your podcast for a chat. I am deeply honored, so thank you.
Have a great season, or have a great end of season.
You too. I hope you get some rest.
Thank you. And that's episode 44 of the Seed Farmer podcast. Thank you, Alexis, for being on the podcast, and looking forward to seeing Alexis and all of you at the Solstice Seed Celebration, also known as the Organic Seed Community Virtual Open House on December 17th. That link is in the show notes. Thank you to Sophia Sedalton for the theme music. You can hear more of their music at sophiasedalton.com. Thank you to Molly Brisebois for editing this episode and for removing all our additional giggling to make this episode a little bit clearer for your ears. And thank you so much for joining me in these conversations with seed farmers. You can find more seed growing resources on my blog at seedgrowers.farm. While you're there, you can subscribe to my newsletter full of seed growing, crop planning, and farm spreadsheets. You can also find out where to order a copy of my book, The Seed Farmer, a complete guide to growing, using, and selling your own seed. And you can support the podcast at spreadsheet.farm/supportpodcast, or follow the link in the show notes. If you haven't already subscribed to this podcast, now's the time. You wouldn't want to miss the next episode. Until then, happy farming.